Hello, welcome to The Wandering Drew. I am Drew. On today's episode, I'd like to cover my recent through hike of the Foothills Trail and some of my thoughts and reflections on both the trip and some of the gear choices that I made. As I'm somewhat new to longer backpacking trips, this trip represented several things to me. It was a first in a lot of ways, and it was the longest trail that I've ever hiked contiguously, and that was a good confidence booster, a psychological victory, if you will, because it shows me that I can do longer distances. I consistently did around 16 miles average most of the days. It was the longest trip that I spent solo backpacking, being 4 days, 4.5 days, but 4 nights out in the woods by myself. 90% of the time, more than 90% of the time, I was by myself. On the second day of the trail, I only saw 4 people, 2 groups of 2 walking. So there's a lot of solo time and solitude. And everything you do, whatever choices you make, are yours to make and yours to fail. So if it comes out good, it's good. If it comes out bad, it's bad. It's no one to blame but you. On my Saturday, being near Table Rock State Park, there were a lot more people out. I probably passed close to 50 people that day. Being that it was near the trailhead and it was a Saturday, you would anticipate more use of the trail. And there were several people that were starting their through hikes after a week full of work. I had attempted the same trail in February, and unfortunately for me, that hike ended in an injury, so I wasn't able to complete it. After about 2.5 days, I had to get off the trail. So there was a little apprehension and concern going back to this trail. Would I be able to complete it? Would I get injured again? Even though I always say, you're out there hiking, it's not a fail, but to me it was, because I didn't complete my goal. And I was worried that maybe I had hiked too much. So I had vowed to shorten my distances this hike, and I even added a 6th day in the hike. And it turns out I really didn't need that, but I planned for that. So once again, I had a plan, but I was flexible enough. And that's one of the things you need to be when you're hiking. You need to be flexible. Trail conditions, weather, all these things dictate how your hike goes. And these are factors that you sometimes have no control over. I learned what distances I'm pretty much capable of doing on a consistent basis. And I would say that's around 15 to 16 miles that I can plan to do on most trails. So I would have to alter that based on the terrain. But for me, in planning purposes, I'll probably use as a 15-mile day for me being the measuring tool, the yardstick that I'll use going forward. It also increased my knowledge and ability and confidence in myself to not only backpack, but to make decisions for navigation, for following the map, and just in general, just deciding what I'm doing, when and where. I'm just going to recap my days and the little highlights. Day 1 went very well. I got it off to a start after being ferried to the trail. Still able to do a healthy 16.4 to Burroughs Ford from Oconee State Park. So I did end up hiking at night. I went further than I planned, much further. And in hindsight, that was one of the decisions that I probably might change, but it worked out very well. I don't regret it, really. I regret more that night that I tried to camp in the parking lot where it was rock and not finding a proper campsite so I could set my tent up. And I thought that was really a bad decision, but I was tired at the end of the day. It was dark already. I was hiking by headlamp the last probably 40 to 50 minutes. I didn't realize it was going to be gravel and rock, which made it very hard to stake out the tent. But it worked out good. It was a cool night that night, and I slept well. Day 2 was another good day with good weather. Had no issues that day. Made it to the same point that I had hiked to my first through hike attempt in February. I felt I was very much on track, and I did not feel any adverse effects of doing that distance. I was just a little concerned because the next day was the day that I got injured on my first trip. So there was that looming dark cloud, so to say, should I be slowing down my mileage? The problem is that most of the days I would plan on doing like 10 or 12 miles at a campsite. And when I got there, it was only like 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, because I had been hiking for 5 to 6 hours. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I got 3 to 4 hours left of daylight, and I didn't want to waste them. I'm obviously very goal-oriented with reaching mileage, and I was obviously dedicated to completing this trail. So I just basically kept walking, hiking on. Maybe if I was with someone else, we might have set up camp and enjoyed it a little bit more. But being by myself, I didn't really want to just stop and sit around at a campsite for 14 or 15 hours. Day 3 was another good day with good weather, but they had predicted a cold front moving in that afternoon to evening hours with associated rain. So I was planned on cutting short that day early. The rain was predicted anywhere between 2 to 8 p.m. And as I was meeting other people on the trail, they kept on telling me it was more like 4 to 6 was the window that the rain was supposed to arrive. So around 3:30, 4 o'clock that day, I had already done very good mileage, and I stopped at a point that I thought was excellent. Beautiful campsites at the Toxaway River. It was right before Heartbreak Ridge, which I don't think I would have really wanted to continue hiking over that. I think it was a great decision, and they had great campsites there. I had water, but I had plenty of room to myself, so I had the solitude. I was set up, had my camp ready, ate my food before sundown, and the rain started about 20 minutes after 6 and lasted till close to midnight. But it really wasn't very hard or heavy. It was mostly light rain to drizzle throughout. So the tent and both I didn't get really tested with rain because it wasn't really heavy. I didn't get a chance to break out my rain gear and use it. And the tent really had no issue with dealing with that rain at all for several hours. The bad part was everything was wet in the morning, and I packed it away wet, and it is what it is. The temperatures got a little colder that day, but not really cold, where it was, an issue. In the morning, it was a little chilly, but during the day, it warmed up again to around 60 degrees, so it was great hiking weather. And I think that if I was to do this trail again in the same direction, I would probably plan on stopping at the Toxaway River right before Heartbreak Ridge, because it sets you up for that next morning, rested, your feet are rested, your body's rested, to doing the ridge, which to me was probably one of the most physical parts of the trail, but it doesn't stand out any more than any other places. On day 4, I once again walked much further than I planned. I had planned on going to a campsite that was right before Sassafras Mountain, the last one I had on my map. I decided after either missing that campsite or not paying attention, and it being early in the day, I decided to push on to a later campsite. And then at that point, I ran into another hiker who told me there was another campsite in between that was closer to Sassafras, but I didn't have that on my map. And it turns out that I guess my map is an older map because I had purchased it well over a year ago, that a newer version is out, and there is a list of another campsite. And I can guarantee and verify that the campsite's there because I stayed there and I took pictures of it, and it's in my video. And I was really fortunate to run into the hiker. I wasn't sure that he was right. I didn't want to gamble on him. I actually did, I think, try to push too far that day. I had tried to make it to Cantrell campsite later in the day when I had several hours. And as the day went on, I saw my mileage just wasn't going to make it. There was no way I was going to make the extra 7 miles or so to the Cantrell campsite. So when I came upon this campsite, I decided to stop and pitch my tent. And I had the campsite once again all to myself. Water was right there. There was a little stream there. It was a beautiful campsite. I enjoyed staying there, and I was able to check the weather nearby, and it was showing 26 degrees. So at altitude, I was probably about 1,800, 1,600 feet. It might have been as cold as 22, 24 degrees. That was my worst night camping and sleeping. My feet were cold and my legs were cold. I did have extra clothing that I could have put on, and in hindsight I probably should have, but it wasn't that bad. Day 5 was my last day on the trail. It was shorter mileage. I started from that campsite, went up to Sassafras Mountain, and then down into Table Rock State Park to Pinnacle Mountain, and of course into the end of the trailhead at Table Rock. And that was a great day. Probably some of my favorite parts of the trail were the approach up to Sassafras, just because they were picturesque. There were some wide portions of the trails. I ran into a hunter up there. I also ran into a lot of people that day because I was near Table Rock. had a really great day that day. It was really cold to start with. It took a while to warm up, but I think, and maybe that's just because it was the last part of the trail, but I really think that that was probably my favorite part of the trail. I mean, there was several good parts, but I think I just enjoyed that part more when there were wide open spaces, and I wasn't anticipating all the views that I would get at Table Rock State Park and Pinnacle Mountain. I wasn't prepared for that. Most of the time you're in trees and your view is kind of blocked or obstructed, but there were several parts that I had open, picturesque views, and I really was surprised by that. I wasn't anticipating it. And like I said, I met probably 50 people that day, hiking, families. It was really nice to see a large group of people enjoying the park and the trail. And if I had one regret, I think I would have probably talked to more people and maybe even asked to videotape them or record them so I could include them in some videos. I think that would have been interesting. The biggest issue I had on this trip was with my gear, and it was my camera. I constantly talk in my videos and even post at the end that I kept having problems with my camera. And this is the camera that I had trouble with. It's the Nikon Coolpix AW130. I've had it for approximately 4 years. It's been on all of my hikes, all the video and the pictures that you see more or less in my opening. And on the trail, my Art Lobe trail, I've been on the AT with this trail, with this camera twice. And all those videos were shot with this camera. I've never had a problem with it before. It's never disappointed me. I'm going to assume that it was probably the cold weather that reduced the power of the batteries. But I brought 3 batteries that were fully charged, and I had numerous videos when I went back and looked because I thought they were recorded, I didn't have, or they were 1 second in length. I don't know why. It would turn on, do 1 second, then shut back off. And I had a lot of videos like that that were really, I missed everything and they were unusable. And several that surprisingly were actually out of focus. So I know cold weather probably was a factor. Batteries and the camera, I started on the last 2 days bringing them in my sleeping bag at night so they would stay warm. And I think I did see a better performance on those days, but I still had a lot of issues, even on Sassafras Mountain. But I went through all 3 of my batteries, and normally I could use a battery for a day, day and a half. And there were some days I went through all 3 batteries. So there definitely was an issue with the cold weather and a reduction in power of the batteries. I've replaced it with the camera since I came back, which I'm using to record this video. It's my first time using it, so I hope this video comes out good. And I'm hoping to take that camera on the trail. It's just a lot heavier and bulkier than this one, but it does have one of the things that I regret this doesn't, which is a window that I can turn outside and see myself when I record. As you notice, most of the time it's pretty intuitive. You can kind of tell when you're in the frame, but several of my videos you'll notice I actually miss my face a little bit. It's low, just recording from my nose or the eyes down, and it's not 100%. So that video screen really will be helpful in hopefully making better videos. I'm not giving up on this camera. It will stay in the family. I'll either take it on trips, maybe warmer weather trips, or it'll be passed down to one of my children to use and continue having more adventures, I hope. The tent worked well. I had no issues really with condensation except for day 1 when I kept all the flaps closed. Even the other days when I felt I should have had condensation, there really was an issue. Even on the day when it rained, the outside of the tent was wet, but the inside was dry. There was no condensation on the tent, and I was really anticipating there being a lot that day with 100% humidity, and I didn't have a problem. So, but I did keep some tent flaps open, and there was a nice breeze going most of the night. My backpack performed well. It was light, comfortable, felt very good wearing it. I got to admit that I really would like a pocket or 2 extra on it. I am used to that, but it's not a deal breaker. I'll adapt to it. And the only issue that I seemed to have was with the left shoulder strap, which I actually did get an abrasion, not a blister, but it was definitely worn. It's still bothering me a little bit as I record this. It seems to be a trouble spot that I had. I actually taped my skin after that with some Leuco tape, and I didn't really have a problem after that. And adjusting that strap a little better is probably something I will do in the future going forward. And if need be, I will either get some extra padding for that shoulder strap, or I'll just tape my skin in the future so I don't have an issue. Hopefully it won't be an issue. My stove performed well this time. Maybe I'll do a little video on that, but I didn't have any crunchy pasta. The stove, while it cooks the food, it can't make it taste much better sometimes. I did bring along extra clothing. I wanted to try out what are called like fitness tights or compression tights. So I brought my regular clothes and those clothes. So I had an extra pair of clothes, which added to about a pound of weight. I wore them probably 2.5 days. The first day or two I wore regular pants, and then I switched over to the compression pants. And I gotta say, I really like them. The only downside of that is obviously I wear a pair of shorts over them, so I have pockets. With the compression shorts, you have no pockets. I think I'll be hiking with them in the future. And surprisingly, they were actually heavier than my camping pants. Not by much, it's like an ounce or two difference, but socks, I brought 2 different types of socks this time. I brought wigwam socks, which I found to be much thinner than the darn tough ones. They're also slick, they feel slippery in the shoe. But I did not get any blisters with my shoes or my sock combinations, even when I switched up, and my feet did very well. I'm very happy about that. I use these shoes, the Ultra Timp, and I just feel they're not very rigid. I love the toe box, they're very wide. I did have an issue with my right foot hitting the toe box in the front, just like on my last trip, even though I'm up to an 11.5 now. I actually have purchased new shoes, and I went up to a size 12 even, so I'm hoping to stop that. I have a bruised nail, but luckily it has not fallen off like last trip. So with bringing less clothes next time, hopefully packing less food, because once again, I overpacked. I planned for 6 days on the trail, and I had food for 6 days, and I only did it in 4.5. I still end up with extra food. I unfortunately forgot to weigh my food bag when I got back, and I threw a lot of that food out because I wasn't going to bring it home with me. But I did have more than enough food. I probably could have stayed out easily another 3 to 4 days. At the last minute, I did pick up some snacks, some jerky. So my food bag was weighing about 5.5 pounds for the 6 planned days. So I know that's less than most people bring on the trail. I know they use a 1.5 to 2 pound estimate per day, but I feel that was just way too much food, and I'm gonna try to pare that down in the future. Stoveless is always an option. I find more and more I'm just happy eating a bar or a protein bar or like, trail mix or stuff like that, jerky even on the trail. It's not forever, it's just while there, but I still really like having a hot meal at night. I had pasta, I had soup. I really found those to be a great comfort at night, and just get you ready for the nighttime routine and warm you up, and just all in all makes the day seem better. I would consider doing this trail again. I would definitely hike it as I did it, or just even the sections. I really wouldn't mind doing Sassafras Mountain again and Table Rock Park. I like the whole trail, but I think all of it has interesting topography and positive parts. I would consider doing it again, no problem. It's a well-marked, well-maintained trail. Even in the videos, I texted to them some photos and a trail report of a blockage, blowdown on the trail, and the next day they responded to me telling me that it had been cleared. They had already sent volunteers out, had cleared that part of the trail, and it was really passable. I mean, you had to climb up the mountain a little bit to get over it, but it wasn't impossible, and they were very responsive. I was very impressed with that. And this trail clearly shows the amount of work that they put in. So kudos to them, and thank you for making and marking the trail as much as you do. I think I finished the trail too soon. I was so focused on the mileage and completing the trail after what happened in February with my injury, and just goal-oriented on making mileage every day and getting the trail done, that I think I missed out on possible adventures on side trails, visiting the waterfalls, and just enjoying more time outside. So if I was to do this trail again, I think I would slow down and smell the roses, so to say, and enjoy some of the side trails. So perhaps if I do go up there in November for the FTC annual meeting, I'll consider doing the trail again, or a section of it, especially Table Rock State Park or Sassafras Mountain. I probably would consider those portions, and maybe even if I just spend an overnighter or a weekend out there, it might be something to do. I believe next year it's going to be at Oconee State Park. It was at Table Rock this year. So more than likely, I'll be on the other side of the trail. But, in a short drive, 50, 60 minutes, I can be anywhere on the trail and maybe do an overnighter or at least some hiking. And I look forward to that again. If you like this video, please give it a like. Let me know you're out there. Leave a comment below. good, bad, or otherwise. Always looking for ideas for more videos and more content. If you feel you have a suggestion or a trail, I'd like to hear from you. Please post it below. Let me know how I'm doing. If you're so inclined, please subscribe. Once again, I thank you for taking time out to watch my video. Till we meet again.